Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Come is Hot. We have a very special guest with us today, Kalilah. I'm very excited to have you join us. You are a speaker, you help people and organizations improve communication barriers and challenges by finding commonality through humor, engagement, and history. You have an expertise in politics and advocacy and so many awesome things. You also have your own company. I'd love to turn it over for you to you. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay. I appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah. And what are your pronouns?
She, her, and hers.
Great, same. And before we dive into all the good stuff, what is one way you're experiencing joy?
Oh, Lord. The way I experience joy is when, especially in entrepreneurship, you are running into so many new things that I'm afraid of. If I could be completely honest, because you don't know how it's going to end up. You don't know how it's going to figure it out. But once I figure it out, I do what I call bitch, you doing a good job dance. Because you celebrate the fact that you won and you overcame an obstacle that you were fearful of. And so that's where I get joy from.
Oh my gosh. I That's awesome. I'm so glad you shared that. Is
Yes.
it kind of like what's the recent time you've done it?
It can be something small.
Uh-huh.
It can be, let's say, having a conversation with my child's teacher, or it can be speaking in front of a crowd of a number that I've never spoken in front of people at that grade of number before. So it could be something small or big, like, hey, I went to sleep at 9. Bitch, you doing a good job. Or it could be I've spoken in front of 200 people. I'm doing a good job. So either way, I'm celebrating, and that's what I get joy from.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. We should celebrate these moments. It doesn't
Yes.
have to be something grand and huge. Like
Mhm.
there are so many people who, for them, getting out of bed in the morning and even just brushing their teeth, doing some things, getting back into the routine, taking care of the kids, making sure things are kind of flowing and going. Like we got to celebrate those moments.
Yep. And then also what I've learned from other people I've talked to over time is it's all about celebrating the small wins, because when you do finally have that big win, you think that you're going to acknowledge it and you're going to be appreciative of it, but you actually won't because you weren't celebrating. The joy doesn't come later on down the line. The joy has to come today.
We should dive into that. Oh my gosh. Now, you do have your own company. Would you
Yes.
like to, for the listeners and viewers, just quickly share what your motivation was in starting your own company?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Okay. I think we talked a little bit about this earlier. It all started in 2020 with George Floyd in the middle of the summer. I'm an African American woman, and I had so much anxiety. I was so depressed. I would wake up with nightmares because anybody who was on social media during that time, you were being inundated with posts of people who were being killed out in the streets. So I wanted to take that power back. I wanted to provide some positivity to the world by uplifting others. And we needed people who had a nurturing spirit in order to do that. Who was better to nurture others than women? So I wanted to coach women to use their voices to uplift their communities. And that was my solution to the anxiety that I was having, and really helping people impact the world just like how they had always wanted, but maybe might have been fearful of speaking out.
Thank you so much for sharing the motivation that you have in starting your company. And I'm deeply inspired by you. And I have so much respect for you for seeing what's going on around you and the impact that was and is still happening in your community, in the Black community, and you taking action even through feeling exhausted and frustrated and all of the feels. And not only did you do something to kind of pull yourself to a better place, but you're also giving back and helping to empower your community. And that is something I feel is just forever. I respect you, admire you. I'm so grateful that you're doing this. And as I'm sure so many other women and people are who have gotten a chance to work with you.
Absolutely, and this is a poor analogy, and I need to find another analogy. But I don't know if you've ever seen a STD chart where they show if you slept with this person, that means you slept with 10 other people. And then those people slept with all these other people. So then in the end, you've slept with like 100 people. That's my idea of coaching. I coach one person, that person coaches 10, and those 10 people coach 10 more. And that's the way it works, like a ripple effect. I need another analogy, but all I think of is the STD chart.
I feel like, well, one, what I love about that analogy is that it's like we're not shaming anybody. It's just
No.
acknowledging that's a thing. And so you're kind of doing your own fun version of it.
Yes, yes. And it's something that, I mean, I'm assuming, especially because you're a teacher as well, and people who are listening to this are probably 18 and up. They might have been in a clinic or two in their lives and seen that chart on the wall.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very, very well recognized and known analogy, I think. And for me, you're creating impact. And I think of like teachers and people who coach as nurturers, like you said, as people who tend to our communities, and also as healers, as people who hold space to really acknowledge, hey, what's going on behind the scenes, not just focusing on the theory or like what we need to do, but rather acknowledging like us as people and our experiences. That's why I'm really glad to have you on today because I feel like you have a similar perspective as a nurturer, as an educator, and as a coach.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your personal background.
Okay. So, what else about me? Okay, so I'm 40 years old. I'm a mother of a daughter of 9. I have a 20-year-old stepdaughter, and I'm also married for 11 years. I have a degree in political science. That is where my love is. So, I've always wanted to help the community, no matter how old I was, even as a child, giving away my lunch money to kids that couldn't afford it. This is just ingrained in me. So then I began getting involved in politics, but I think that's why I was so disturbed over the past few years that I decided to get out of it because it was very ugly and I didn't like what it was doing to me emotionally, but I wanted to have an impact in a different way. And sometimes that's even helping potential politicians in the future utilize their voices as well and have that human connection because that is most important when it comes to public speaking is human connection where someone can feel seen, heard, and valued no matter what race, color, creed they're from. I feel like that's tried and true no matter where you are in the world.
And that's part of your motto for your business, right?
Yeah, it is. Where every audience member and client feels seen, heard, and valued. Yes.
Mm. I that really resonated with me because I feel like I can relate to you in my own way, being like previously involved in different organizations and even in academia, it's just become so necessary for things to be addressed that are just so overwhelming and traumatizing for people that I think I'm seeing a lot of burnout. I'm seeing a lot of burnout. My friends who are people of color, with students of color, it's like this constant state of just burnout and feeling overwhelmed and exhausted. And it feels like when I have a conversation with you, you're like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
You're like, we can do this. Like, we can't give up, we can't stop. And so I really appreciate you for having that energy and sharing it with me and
Yeah.
with everybody.
Yes. And then that's what I do. I always encourage my clients to share their mess because that's where your message is. So if you are burned out, share that you're burned out because what you'll find is that there are other people who will admit that they feel the same way too. And you will provide that open door for them to share their emotions, to really share their truth if you're willing to do the same. I remember I was watching Sex and the City and the lady said something about having children and just being burned out by having children. Moms don't usually say that. Everything is always perfect all the time. And so then to hear her say that made me say, oh, wait, it's okay for me to speak now because that person's saying it. And that's how, even if you are burned out or you're going through any adversity in life, share it. Don't feel shame in it at all because there's a lot of people can relate to you.
I really love that. I try to encourage my students in our class to take their backgrounds that have been used systemically to oppress them, to challenge the systems of power and instead say, I'm not going to be ashamed of who I am or my experiences. And in fact, I'm going to be sharing them, which is another reason why I love the work that you do so much. You also believe in the power of storytelling and
Yes.
sharing our stories. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Sure, sure. So I can tell a story about how I got involved in public speaking, not as a business, but when I first started speaking was I think I had shared with you that this is how it all started. I was in deeply in debt. Okay. I was being garnished by the IRS and the state of California. I had creditors not only calling me off the phone ringing off the hook with anxiety every time the phone rang, they were also knocking at my door. I was working 2 full-time jobs and a full-time student at the same time. But this is something that had happened generationally. I grew up hearing my grandma screaming at creditors on the phone, sitting there watching TV with my friends on the TV and seeing the TV get shut off because the TV wasn't paid or their light bills weren't paid. So it only made sense that the same thing was going to happen to me when I got older. But my mom was determined and she saw the stress and the anxiety that I was going through because I would just be under the covers and cry. I couldn't answer my phone. I couldn't go to the door. I was just, and I'm 22 years old. I'm a college student. And my mom sent me to Debtors Anonymous, a 12-step program where we learned that we're powerless over our addiction because I was using money as a way to avoid stress. I was using it as a way to avoid anxiety and my own problems. Because what do? We're not feeling good. We go out with our friends and sometimes spend money that we don't have. We go on vacation spending money we don't have, or we buy cars and clothes that we don't have. Through that 12-step program, as a 22-year-old, still woman, but with a mentality of still, not really knowing anything, I began sharing my story with doctors and lawyers and other accountants that were in my 12-step meetings. And they became inspired by what I was saying. I then began speaking in other meetings all throughout Southern California, then joined the board of Debtors Anonymous, empowering people to share their stories, to change their mess into their message. And that's how I became a public speaker. And that's why I believe storytelling is the true connection. Because in 12-step programs, all you're doing is telling stories all day long. When you're watching a movie, you're telling a story. Every time you pick up the phone, you're telling a story. And that's why stories are important for speaking.
Mm. I want to say thank you so much for being open and willing to share your experiences, your past, and being vulnerable and open, which I think we both know how powerful vulnerability can be.
Mhm.
And I also think this is a topic that's got to start being given more visibility, which is the ways that we cope with what's going on around us. And sometimes it's a distraction. Some people use distraction as a coping mechanism. And for some people, that's shopping, going out, spending money we don't have. I also am very guilty of that. Do you want to say any more?
Yeah, I mean, just that our parents did the best that they could with
Mm,
what they had. They brought us half the way, and it's up to us to kind of break those cycles and move forward. And that's all that we can do when it comes to money, I think, or not even money, just any addiction. Everyone has sometimes, I think, I'm not even going to say sometimes, everyone has an unhealthy coping mechanism somewhere in their life. There might not be a 12-step program for it, but I think it's about people looking internally and thinking, what am I doing in my life that can be causing harm to myself or others? And trying to do whatever you can to curb that pattern so you can just have a better outlook on life. And just move forward more positively in the future.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for your words of wisdom. And I feel like you did create a better future for yourself.
Mhm.
I'm so grateful for you. And now you're even working with helping other people go through that program.
Yeah, yeah, because I think it's very important. And I think that what I have that a lot of coaches don't have, because I also work a full-time job. I'm a social worker. I deal with domestic violence, substance abuse, and mental health. And so when women come to me, there is nothing I haven't heard. There's no shame here. Just it's about just you dealing with whatever traumatic situation you had, how you're going to articulate that and use that to connect with your audience. That is really what the goal is.
I feel like you're really dedicated to help empower people regardless of what they've been through. You're giving me the chills.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what I tell people is you are not your past, even if it was just 5 minutes ago. And even if it was just 5 minutes ago, what's done is done. We need to move forward. And what can we do to move forward? I think there's always a lot of regret. Even starting my business, I was afraid of being visible at first because I thought someone who I had done wrong, and I did a lot of people wrong in my life, were going to come out and expose me. But you can't let that fear of your family or any mistakes that you've made in the past stop you from moving forward into the future.
Yeah. Thank you for being honest about that as well. I think a lot of people are held back by
Mhm.
fear of the judgment, fear of maybe the past, fear of failure, fear of rejection. Now, you are an expert in your field. What would you tell someone who may be a little bit held back by fear?
Mhm. That fear will always be there. It's not going to go away. I wish I had some magic potion I could give every single one of my clients that would eliminate the fear. But it's about facing the fear and doing it anyway. And actually proving to yourself how well that you can do and the impact that you can have on others. And then once you do that, the fear starts to dissipate. But then you have to advance onto something else. So every thing that you're going to do that's new, you're going to be afraid of because you've never done it before. So don't let the fear stop you and think that, oh, well, once the fear's gone, I can move forward. I will let you know that if the fear is stopping you, you will never move forward.
Wow. Thank you for your honesty.
Mhm,
We have to figure out how to manage it
mhm,
and manage the anxieties in
mhm.
addition to the fear. That's something that we focus on in my classes. And let me tell you, there's a lot of people with a lot of anxieties going on and a lot of fears going on. So I'm very excited to have you speaking to this. What would you say would be if someone was struggling with public speaking, struggling with just, those fears, but they wanted to do something, what would be like a starting point? Like you're an expert and I would regret not asking you for some insider tips. What might you offer someone?
I think the first thing when it comes to public speaking, because I believe in authenticity, I'm an open book. I think a lot of the fear comes from people pleasing and worrying about other people's expectations. And the first thing that you need to do is follow your own heart, follow your own spirit, what it's guiding you to do, and not focus so much on how other people are going to react to what you're doing. If you want to first work on your public speaking skills, I think it's also important to start by talking to people in your regular life, people who you're coming across, speaking to your waitress. You would imagine how many they don't speak to. And it sounds very small, like small wins. But some people are so anxious about speaking to anyone, let alone public speaking. So I tell them the first step that you need to do is by speaking to people you come across in your regular life, these perfect strangers that most people ignore. And you will see their face light up because you're doing that. And that will give you the confidence to continue to speak more often because you will see that people see value in your words.
Mic drop.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh. This is life-changing advice for folks. This reminds me of when a student who I had who is a server was sharing that a lot of the times she felt really unseen, even though she was interacting with people all day long. And it was almost as if it was because people were just treating her like like j- just different, not like a full complex human being. And she said that some of her favorite customers were people who would acknowledge her. Not just like a, you know, "Oh, yeah, sure, how's your day?" But, like, they would actually take a minute to try to connect in some type of way. So I really appreciate you acknowledging the people who are in these industries and doing these jobs who a lot of the times I feel aren't always treated the best.
Yes, and take the time to say their names. They have the name tag on. So when I'm at the register and I'll say, "Hey, Jade. Hey, Karen, how are you doing today?" Or whatever, "How's the day treating you? Are you gonna be off soon?" Or something like that, just small talk. And that's how you start public speaking. So it doesn't start on the stage. It starts at the grocery store.
Oh my gosh, I love this. Genius tip. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. What's one of the things that you experienced as a challenge or barrier that you had to kind of personally overcome as you built your coaching business?
Asking for help.
Mm,
Asking for help has been my biggest barrier. I grew up an only child, a latchkey kid that was, walking home and doing my homework and sending myself to sleep at night and feeling like I could only depend on me, myself, and I.
mm,
In business, it doesn't work that way. You can't do all the things and you're not good at all the things. I'm not good at numbers
mm,
or spelling. I'll be honest about. Yeah. And so you need to ask someone for help. Like, I need to have somebody help me with my website. I need to have somebody help me show me how to do my accounting. Or you're relying on other entrepreneurs to ask for help because they've gone further than you have and they have more experience. So just the simple act of picking up the phone or sending somebody a message and asking them for advice would give me anxiety.
mm,
And so, but I had to learn that in order for me to advance within my business, I had to ask for help. There's no other way. And that's not only in business, that's just life in general. You're not always going to be 100%. You may get sick. You may need somebody to help you or give you a ride somewhere, or you may run out of money and need to ask for a loan. So you just don't sit and suffer in silence because you would be surprised the amount of people that are out there that are willing to help if you just say something. My grandma has a phrase that says, closed mouth don't get fed. And it's very true. If you don't open up your mouth, there won't be anybody there to help you. So then it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy where you say, well, now I can't depend on anybody. Well, you can't because you're not asking.
mm.
And I'm still working on it. I don't have as much anxiety as I used to have about asking for help, but what I can say is I'm better than I was, a year ago or a month ago. It's a work in progress. That's how we all are.
Mm. I want to just say thank you for sharing that. I know you have an emphasis focusing on helping empower women specifically. Would you say that that was kind of also a motivating factor because you had like women in your family who either you realize, oh my gosh, they like did their best. And there are a lot of other women out there who are probably feeling the same way, like you said earlier. Uh, do you want to speak more about that?
Yeah, I grew up with very powerful women in my family, women who all helped their communities. So I guess I'm just falling in line with them. My mother she just retired this year. She was a registered nurse for almost 40 years, but she was also a union rep for the California Nurses Association. So she would be knocking on congressmen's doors and protesting outside of Arnold Schwarzenegger's house with the bullhorn and sending women on strike and all that different kind of thing. I have my aunt, she's a physician and she helps mentors children all the way from elementary school all the way into college, African American students to be doctors. I have another aunt that helps people who are with disabled parents who have disabled children. And I have another aunt that goes out and runs a company feeding the homeless. So I always, yeah, so I come from a long line of women who have all helped their community. And then that's how I am. But we don't ask for help, but we help everybody else.
And somebody's gotta help you.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's your family sounds incredible. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I got the chills, like, just it was like boom, 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 all these amazing, wonderful things, and giving back to so many different communities and being such awesome people. So, wow, I guess it's no surprise to me that you're also giving back to your community.
I know. I really didn't think about it too much until you asked the question.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for being open to me asking that. What would you say would be given this given this kind of context, knowing how much impact one person can have in a community, are you feeling like this was your calling, or do you feel like it just kind of happened?
I always knew since I was a child, I would look in the mirror and say, "You're gonna change people's lives." I didn't know how. I don't know. I'm in the right place I am for right now at the moment
Mm.
as a coach. I don't know where I'll be later on, but wherever it is, it'll be where the spirit guides me. My internal guide, that's all I follow. And so if it feels right, in my heart, then that's what I'm gonna do. And right now, coaching women feels right in my heart. Inspiring women and empowering them to use their voices feels right deep in my spirit. And that's all that I have to follow. I'll still be empowering women no matter what I do, but it might not be in the coaching capacity. It might be in something else. I'm not sure. But right now, I'm winning.
You really are. I mean, you're helping to empower so many women and so many people just be more confident. Now, one of the things about public speaking that everybody talks about is that word confident.
Mhm.
Want to say more about that? Are we like, is it overrated?
I think you do have to have a certain level of confidence in public speaking. But the confidence might not be in speaking, it might be just in the fact that you know your subject matter. Do you have confidence in the subject matter? And if you have confidence in that, then you can be a good speaker. I think when it comes to public speaking, people are so caught up in developing the skill of public speaking when you need to just have the skill of whatever it is that you're talking about, and then the confidence will follow. And confidence also comes from you just showing up, doing the work, showing that you can actually proving to yourself, not to the audience, that you can do it. And then that's where the confidence comes from. It's internal. It's not something that anybody else needs to validate you for. It was it good enough for you? And if it's good enough for you, then that should just be it.
I 100% agree. I never thought to phrase it like that. And this is why you are the expert and so good at what you do. That is such a beautiful way to put it. I mean, I think there's so much pressure on public speakers and people who go into delivering presentation. And they're always the fears and anxieties are always on like, oh, what's the audience gonna think? Oh, like audience, audience, audience. Let's toss that out the window. I love
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's also developing the understanding that you're never going to be liked by 100% of the people, no matter what you do. There's nothing that you can do. There's no magic sauce that's going to make everybody like you. So you might as well just be comfortable with who you are because you're punishing yourself trying to be a version of something that you're not. So just be authentic, show up, and be comfortable with the fact that hey, some people aren't just going to like what I say. But what matters most is that 90% of the people in the room are going to resonate with what you said. The 10% can go to hell in a loving way.
Honestly, my human sexuality and psychology professor taught me this at my community college, and she called it the 10% asshole rule. And she said 10% of people in an audience or in a classroom are just going to be like not on board. And she was like, don't waste your time on those people. Like, don't, that's not the energy you want. And I can't help but think about my students in this moment because I've had so many of them want to talk about systemic racism, oppression, interpersonal racism, and microaggressions, and the ways that so many systems are broken and failing them and their families. And a lot of the times, one of their biggest blockers is that they're worried they're gonna offend someone in their audience because they're talking about something that only affects them and their community.
Mhm.
Like, this is well, what might you offer a student in that moment?
The first thing is to understand that racism doesn't just affect the marginalized group, it affects everyone. So let's say if you're purchasing a house as an African American person and they devalue your property because of color of your skin, how do you think that affects your white neighbor's property value now?
Mhm.
You know, if in the education system, if you have people of a certain marginalized group that aren't getting the proper education, how does that affect the overall economy? Not well. So I think we have to dismiss this idea that racism only affects the people who are being directly impacted by racism. It affects everyone. When talking about racism, because I talk about it a lot, I try to articulate it in a way for other people to understand that I'm not attacking them. These are just the facts, and try to use analogies in a way that they would understand, but then also having grace with them because sometimes when you're having conversations about racism, people will say things that are offensive. And that's another fear because you're already putting yourself out there and then they're going to say something that's offensive. But it's okay. They're trying to do the work, they're trying to show up, they want to know. And I think that way you can make some inroads. But going back again to the 10%, I would tell the kids don't let the 10% stop you from inspiring the 90%.
Mhm.
So you can make real change by having this dialogue with people, but and also think about it in a way of now they may not do something to another person in your group because you've had this conversation. I know I
My
was kind of all over the place, but yeah.
like sec third, fourth, fifth mic drop. I'm losing track of how many mics we're dropping. You're dropping.
But it is difficult. I think racism is one of the most difficult topics to discuss, at least for me,
Mm,
but it's needed.
mm. I just wanna check in and ask to make sure well, not make sure, but just check in and ask how you're feeling about us discussing this topic.
Oh, I'm completely fine.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm fine.
I wanna say thank you so much for being willing and open to speaking on this, and I recognize that I acknowledge that there's part of emotional labor that comes with this on your part, and the risk of being offended or further hurt when you're trying to help educate people on this. And I feel like it's really helpful for hopefully my students who will listen to this to hear your words and realize there's no worth on those 10%. Focus on the other percent. Focus on that 90% who you can have that positive impact on. So thank you for being willing to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that should actually be discussed more because it just leads to just more general understanding of one another. And
Yeah.
when you do talk about racism, what you'll discover is even though somebody might not be the same race as you, they may have a similar story than
Mm.
you because they might also come from a marginalized group, or someone also might have not wanted to talk to them because of the way that they looked. So there's ways that you can find commonality so they can understand because they're just looking at the skin color. But they're not thinking about that time when they were in the 5th grade when the kids didn't wanna play with them because their mom cooked some stinky food or something. You know?
Yeah.
But it's the
Yeah.
same thing. It's all about, culture or, just people come from different demographics, and we all have our own barriers. And so we have more similarities than not.
I appreciate that perspective. I feel like it's one that I've heard from multiple guests I've had on my show where they say they've told me they've said, Jade, it's not about me able to relate to racism itself or that pain or that hurt, but it's the ability to recognize and say, I can see hurt, I can see pain, I can see injustice, I can name it, and I can also recognize that it's not okay, recognize how I benefit from it, how whiteness benefits from it, and how we've got to, especially as white people and, white listeners and viewers, use our abilities and privileges to dismantle the systems and take on white supremacist ideology to really make things safer for everybody, for for everybody who's impacted by systemic racism. And
What I will say about the racism issue is the time I discovered when I was in high school that I was able to recognize bigotry, or I don't know what word I'm gonna use, in another group was I didn't grow up around any Jewish people. I don't even think I might not even known a Jewish person. But when I was in school and they put something on the TV and the kids behind me were making these jokes that I didn't understand, but I recognized that almost as racism, even though the people weren't black. That's the way you can see the intersectionality. You think about things that you have encountered in life. And if it didn't feel good about to you and you see somebody else doing it, that's the first indication that, okay, maybe we should have a conversation with these people over there, or maybe I should distance myself from them. So it's just another example of how you can have an experience and it mirrors an injustice for another group.
mm, mm. I really love that you use the word intersectionality. I love that term by Kimberly Crenshaw. And it's really helpful the way that you put it. A it's a hurtful experience to be made fun of, to be excluded. And I think that the best, well, one solution is sharing our stories and not just holding the pain internally. And we know that that actually can have really negative impacts on communities of color and on marginalized groups who internalize because it actually affects the physical health and well being. And I feel like you are working to actively combat that by empowering and teaching people, specifically women, to not be ashamed of their stories and instead be empowered by them. Moving us forward into more of the public speaking aspect of what you do in the coaching, would you say that the main demographic that you're working with is women? And do you work with like all types of ages, all types of backgrounds? Like, what's the typical client like?
Lately, they've been people who are in the professional realm as far as my client I have right now is a dentist, and she's gonna be speaking for the American Dental Association. I have people who are working in I have one of my clients, she was actually talking about 1%, 90%. She was afraid of pitching her idea. She worked in the entertainment industry because there was a person there who would always be dismissive of her ideas, so she didn't wanna pitch. And so I told her, "Don't worry about the 1%, worry about the 90%." That show just won an Emmy. That's so these are the type of women, that I'm working with. who are reluctant to use their voices, but then become empowered by their own thoughts and seeing that they do have talent, speaking out, and then making all these transformations. So, yeah, I work with a lot of professional women, I guess what I say, of different ages, different backgrounds. Some people are American, some aren't. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This is incredible. You are seriously making this huge impact on people's lives. I I'm so honored that you were willing to do this with me.
Oh, girl. I'm honored that you had me on your podcast.
Oh my gosh. I mean, thanks. What's one thing that you think might be a common trend with maybe your clients that you notice? Is there like a similarity in terms of, after coaching for a while and having your business kind of recognizing like, oh, there may be a pattern?
Every single one has been a perfectionist. Every single one. I don't know if it's a characteristic that just comes inherently in women. I don't have any scientific research behind it, but I really do feel like perfectionism stops a lot of women from moving forward. And that's something that clearly impacts my clients. But what I tell them is that there's no such thing as perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect person. So you're trying to strive towards an unrealistic goal. What is the best that you can do? What do you have to bring to the table? Let's highlight the best parts of your personality so you can sell your product or advocate for your cause. But number one thing is perfectionism.
Now that you said that out loud, I see that in a lot of my students who are women, young women. And the academic in me wants to blame the patriarchy. I've got years and years of teaching young women and all genders. And I think, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know, I was thinking about it when you said it and I was like, maybe is it the education system? Because, I mean, it could be both patriarchy because you're always striving towards that A. You're always striving towards first place all the time. And it's like, oh, what there's all kinds of phrases. I can't even think of any. It's like basically there's nothing better than first place and all of that. But in life, that doesn't really matter. You always just want to do your best. I mean, because always striving just to be the best all the time is not healthy, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's just about showing up as your flawed self. And especially when it comes to public speaking. Honestly, the messier the story, the better.
Mhm. Have you always just been this like welcoming and opening and like, I just feel so good with you.
I've always been this I've always been this way because I just believe in taking people as they are, who they want to be, and just supporting that.
Gosh, I feel like that going back to the word you used earlier, like the nurturing, kind of just like open, caring, supportive. My gosh, you must be an awesome parent.
Well, because the thing is when you have these high standards, especially because here we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
Would you be able to relax if you felt judged?
Right. Mm, mm,
This would not be a good conversation if you felt judged.
mm.
So I accept you the way that you are, how you're showing up, and we're going to have a good conversation, and we just find what we have that's in common with each other. And my job is always just to serve and to be a person of service, and in order to be a vehicle for that, I have to make sure that the people I'm speaking to are going to feel comfortable.
You are so phenomenal. I work with so many people, and I think they're, they gotta have to kind of work towards that.
Mhm.
What is it like to build towards being more open and accepting and setting judgment aside? I think a lot of people fear being judged and that judgment, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, they really do. They
You're
really do. And honestly, the whole judging people is exhausting. It's exhausting and it's miserable. Why do you wanna be that way? Just let people be who they are.
Yeah. It's toxic. It's
Mhm.
there is scientific data that people who are super, like, I don't know what it's called. Did you hear about the study with the plants? The people who spoke words of affirmations to the one plant and then spoke, like, hateful words to the other plant? Did you hear about that study?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there's an energy involved. I don't know how to articulate it, but I do know the study with the plants,
Mm,
but it's real.
mm, mm.
It's real.
The energy is very real. Now, you do have a little bit of a background in political science, as you mentioned, but you decided to exit that arena. Are you okay if I just ask a quick question about it?
Absolutely.
What aspect of that the politics were you involved in?
Yeah, so in like saving people's houses, usually done with the economic issue, educating the community on what we needed to do in order to save their houses and save the neighborhoods. I'm also work with unions as far as seeing what the best candidates are that are best for, regular working people and hearing what they need most. So that's what I did in politics.
Oh my gosh. So, one of the things that I ask my students to work on is political persuasion
Mhm.
and developing the element of persuasion in their speeches. Would you like to share maybe a little insight about that from your perspective?
Yes, that's why I know that every person wants to be seen, heard, and valued. And the same thing works in politics. That's where political persuasion comes in. So if you are talking to somebody about a certain initiative that you want to pass, they need to know is how is it going to help me? Do you understand my needs? And as soon as you are able to understand your audience, exactly what their barriers are and what you can do to help them overcome those barriers, you've got their vote.
What? Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and that's how it was, and use the language that they would use. Don't use this highfalutin, like all these kind of words trying to seem smart. Talk how they talk.
Mm,
Use the same language that they did, that they use, and make them feel like their lives are and their families are important.
mm. 100% agree. 100%. I feel like there's so much pressure put on people. Can we talk about imposter syndrome for a moment?
Mhm.
I wonder if some people who may be marginalized based on gender, race, ethnicity, whatever it may be, abilities, who kind of feel like they might not belong or they do kind of suffer from that imposter syndrome. What are your thoughts on that in terms of them kind of finding their voice in advocacy?
I think that I've never heard a person say that they really felt like they did belong. So I think I've kind of come to the understanding over the years, no matter what background you're from, that everybody has felt like they didn't belong. So that's more of proof that we don't belong in any box. What I think when it comes to imposter syndrome, it's what advice I would give somebody is learn the facts about that revolve around what you can do in order to help the particular individuals that you're talking to. There are times, no matter what, where you will always feel like, are you equipped? Are you the right person to be in that position? But what you will always remember, they don't have anybody right now. So you're just taking them a few steps further than what they would have already been, helping their families move a little bit further. So just focus on what facts do you have, what initiatives that can you talk to them about that are going to help improve their lives because you're providing them and giving them the space to give them this information that probably most people are not able or not going to.
Mm,
So always come from a place of love, always come from a place of service and let the imposter stay there. Because there's really nothing that you can do about it immediately. And
mm,
really what comes is the proof in seeing the work. I know like when I was helping trying to save the houses during the 2008 economic crash, I really didn't know what I was doing when I was going around helping people, but all I knew is that I didn't want my neighbors to lose their home. And by doing that, what? The initiative passed and they saved their home because we were out there doing the work.
What? Oh my
Mhm.
gosh.
Yeah, so you don't have to be Einstein to make a difference.
Mm, that's for sure.
You don't. I think also what comes with imposter syndrome is you feel like the people out there who are really making the difference are the people with the PhDs and the lawyers and things, people with all this status. But no, in reality, the people who are really making the difference are the people who are out here on the ground doing the real work.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was one of the highlights that I've seen throughout history in marginalized communities, specifically through grassroots movements of on the ground doing the work, fighting for communities because the
Mhm.
government didn't have their back and doesn't have our back, doesn't have, for me, the trans community's back or whatever. And it's very intense to realize we're at a position where it's like we kind of need to take charge and not rely on these larger systems, which I know people have been doing that work for decades. Stacey Abrams is a huge example that was used to educate people about the power of grassroots effort.
And she lost
Mm.
twice
Mhm.
and still made a difference.
Mhm.
Okay. The president we have today is because of Stacey Abrams. The two senators that are representing the state of Georgia right now are because of Stacey Abrams, but Stacey Abrams lost.
Mhm. Mm.
She still made an impact and changed the direction of the country, and she lost.
Mm. Mm.
So, I mean, I guess the moral of the story is that you don't have to be a winner even to make a difference.
Yeah, yeah. That was a lot of the reason a lot of the articles that I read and interviews that I heard that she did. A lot of people were saying it's not necessarily about the winning or the losing, but it's about the impact that she's made on thousands of people's lives. And it's like
Mhm.
you can't it you can't argue with the power of grassroots movements.
No, and then not even just for people of color, any movement throughout America's entire history since what we got here in 1619. So I don't know, I can't 400 years. It's always started with a grassroots movement. Even when you talk about people coming to America, it was some people coming on 3 ships that were escaping persecution from another country, and look what we have now.
Mhm. Mm.
Every war started by people in a grassroots movement. Any system that was created has started between people in a grassroots movement. There's nothing that has not started anywhere in, I think, of all of history from people at the bottom.
Oh my gosh, we need a whole separate podcast just for that.
Yeah, we do. I'm in American history. I absolutely love American history,
Mm.
all aspects of it, the good and the bad. And I noticed that every single person started off by basically having nothing. I mean, everybody's talking about Hamilton and Alexander Hamilton. He started off as, an orphan who came over here on a boat and then ended up writing the Declaration of Independence.
Mm.
But now people are talking about him in a play that's going around selling millions all over the world.
I bet he never imagined that back when he was years old.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh
Exactly.
my gosh.
Yeah, so anybody can make a difference. It does not matter your status in life, even if you're in a 12-step program.
That's the message I'm looking for.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
true.
but really though, I've had many friends throughout my lifetime and who've gone through various different forms of 12-step programs. And oftentimes one of the patterns that I've learned from each of those friends is at some point you have to realize that there's like value that you have to add to other people's lives still. And I feel like you're taking so much of your own energy and labor and time to help empower other people. I can't help but ask, like, have you had to work on boundary setting? Have you had to work on like self-care so that you don't get burnout?
Yeah, I had to work on boundary setting. I mean, like I talked about earlier about the people pleasing. If because I wanted to do all the things all the time and be there for everyone,
Yeah.
especially when you're talking about working within movements. There aren't a lot of people at the grassroots level. So they rely on people who want to be there regularly, but sometimes you have to be able to say no. Yeah. So I've had to create boundaries, is what I'll say, is knowing. And it's about not waiting till you boil over and have a breakdown. It's about seeing when the anxiety is coming or when you're starting to feel burnt out and then telling yourself you need a break. So then you could have more longevity over time. And that's what I learned, why boundaries are healthy and why it's okay and why it's something I don't need to apologize for. Saying, hey, I know that you had a birthday party, and not making up a lie of why I can't make it. Just saying, you know what, I'm tired. I'm going to stay here. And that's a boundary because everybody wants to people please and everybody wants to show up all the time, but you can't be everywhere all the time. So look within, like I always talk about, trusting your spirit, trusting your gut, knowing when you're about that point where you look, this might be a little bit too much for me. I need to step back and have a break, and
Mm,
being okay with that. And if other people get upset, which they will, it's okay.
mm,
They can go where the 10% goes.
mm.
Ex-
This reminds me of a quote that I heard from a psychologist who said something like, if society's telling you that you're being lazy because you don't want to like meet all of your normal commitments, reframe the word lazy to listening to my body. Why is my body telling me to slow down?
Absolutely.
So I like that. Thank you for speaking to that. I've definitely adopted that mentality of I just tell people no now.
Yeah.
And I think I used to always say yes.
Yeah. And it's liberating. How liberating does that feel? Like when you can just stick to it and say, no, I can't do that right now.
Mm,
And you just being okay with it.
yeah. 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 Oh my gosh, we've covered so much.
Yeah. So I mean, because me as a public speaking coach, I don't I don't really focus on the structure of public speaking. I teach structure, but that actually becomes secondary to allowing my clients to show up authentically and tell their true stories and doing the work behind that.
Mm, mm. I love that. As we kind of move towards the close, which I don't want to, is there anything that we didn't get to discuss yet that you're wanting to discuss? Or is there anything we've mentioned earlier that you want to expand on or revisit?
I think all I want to say to who's ever listening is that you are enough. You are enough. You have value to this world. Any thoughts that come into your mind are meant for you and are meant to be shared with others. And that you're passionate about, speak on it, because I think that that's what you were meant to be here for. So don't fight it. Don't fight it. The relief comes from you being your authentic self. The way I explain it, and I don't know if this is offensive turn, because when I became into my authentic self, the one thought that I came into me in the middle of the night was, this must be what coming out of the closet feels like. Because you're trapped. You're in your own emotional straitjacket by constantly trying to be something that you're not. So release yourself, come out, and understand that you are good enough and you are meant to be who you are. And this is the way you were born. So just accept it.
Oh my gosh. You keep giving me the chills.
So that's
So
all.
many, I'm so many people I feel don't get to hear those words and don't get to hear them from people who they may be really close with. So I want to thank you for sharing those really powerful words, especially for people who I know I'm going to have my students listen to this, might not ever hear that from a parent or might not ever hear that from someone who they really look up to or whatnot. And that can be really encouraging. So thank
Yeah,
you.
when I said it, I was speaking to them. They're enough. Your students are enough.
I felt that.
Yeah,
Um,
especially when you're young, there's so many doubts about this world. And you're not insignificant. We need you. We need you.
mhm. Yes. Yes, we do. We do. And all of my students, while they are all very different, have different personalities and all the things, they are all each so phenomenal. And I'm lucky that you get to meet some of them on the next week. This is oh,
Yes, Tuesday.
well, that is something I'm also looking forward to. I want to thank you. And I also want to open up space for you to kind of give your business a shout out. And also, if you're comfortable with people connecting with you outside of this, just let them know the best way to get a hold of you.
Yeah, anybody that wants to contact me, they can always contact me at Hud Coaching. It's the same on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I am the entrepreneur and the CEO of Hud Coaching. You can find me at www.khudcoaching.com. I offer one-on-one public speaking coaching to women who want to thrive on stage and on social media. On December 3rd, I'm also offering a workshop where we can work with women on how to tell their authentic stories through storytelling. Yes.
That's phenomenal.
Mhm.
Yay. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Of course, anytime.
Yay.